A photograph should never capture something that wasn't there. Never. But when the child touched Aaron for only a few seconds, the impossible slipped into the lens like a whisper from death. And what appeared in the image wasn't human, wasn't spiritual, wasn't explainable. It was a gaze from the other side, a gaze without eyes, a presence that seemed to know the name of whoever stared at it, including yours. Have you ever seen something that made your soul flinch before your body even reacted? That's what you're about to feel. Because this story isn't about ghosts. It's about fractures. About what leaks out of life's borders when someone who should never crosses. Science denies it. Religion fears it. But Aaron's camera captured the kind of proof neither side can dismiss. And that proof is about to be shown. When Mira touched him, the world split in two. One where her body fought to survive, and one where her soul screamed silently for help. You're about to enter that second world. A place made of living light, conscious silence, and shadows that should not exist. A place where every breath has weight, where every choice demands a sacrifice, and where a child can be devoured simply for existing. Aaron never wanted to be a hero, never wanted a mission, never wanted a camera capable of showing what no one should witness. But when that presence appeared behind Mira in the photograph, he realized his life and his death no longer belonged to him. The rules changed, the boundaries shattered, and the only thing standing between Mira and a fate worse than death was a man disappearing with every click. Now I must warn you. If you keep watching, nothing you believe about the afterlife will remain intact. Not a belief, not a doubt, not a certainty. So take a breath, close your door, and prepare yourself, because what you're about to see is not entertainment. It is a calling, a warning, and someone or something is very aware that you're hearing this story. Like the video, subscribe, and tell me, are you ready to see what lives between life and the afterlife? Aaron's death didn't arrive like a violent ending, but like a whisper slipping into the exact moment the world collapsed around him. The crash echoed like a thunderbolt that faded too quickly, leaving behind a silence so heavy it felt alive. Colors dragged across his vision, spilling like rain-washed ink. His body weakened, yet something inside him stayed alert, awake, impossibly steady. And in that fragile space, Aaron realized reality was beginning to loosen its grip on him. He tried to reach for his camera, instinctively believing the familiar weight might anchor him to life for just a second longer. But his fingers ignored him. That's when he noticed he was no longer inside the body he fought to control. He watched from above, unseen, like a shadow clinging to the ceiling. His body lay there, strangers rushed to help, but none of it touched him. None of it felt real. The world was dissolving. Yet something else was rising in its place. A glow appeared at the edge of the darkness. Not a divine explosion, but the memory of a sunrise Aaron swore he had lived somewhere beyond this life. The light breathed. It seemed to hear his thoughts before he formed them. It was a silent invitation, intimate enough to send chills through whatever conscientially into Tinha. There was no fear, only the sense that this light knew him deeply, as if it carried the secret of who he truly was. And without choosing, he drifted toward it. In a heartbeat, the accident scene melted away like an old photograph burning at the edges. The chaos vanished. The weight vanished. Even pain surrendered. Aaron opened his eyes to a place that belonged to no memory. A realm where air felt like liquid light and silence felt sentient. He was between worlds, unable to explain it, yet certain it wasn't a mistake. It was something written long before he arrived. And then came the impossible detail, the camera. The same camera that should have shattered on the asphalt was now in his hand. But it was different. It glowed softly, vibrated faintly, as if it had discovered a heartbeat. It hadn't just crossed over with him. It had awakened. And as Aaron held it, something greater stirred in the distance. The sense that the real story was only just beginning to open its eyes. Aaron opened his eyes and found himself in a place unlike anything the human mind could compare to. The light didn't merely illuminate, it breathed. It formed waves that moved with a strange awareness, brushing against his skin without truly touching. The ground wasn't solid, yet it held him as if made of condensed energy. And the silence was so deep it felt alive inside his thoughts. The silence wasn't emptiness. It was a conversation with something unseen. Every emotion Aaron felt seemed to ripple outward, shaping tiny sparks in the air. The light reacted to his fear, his awe, his curiosity, as if the spiritual plane were observing and answering him. It carried a gentle yet commanding presence, saying without words, "This is sacred ground. Walk with care." Slowly, Aaron realized this place operated under different laws. When he breathed, the light pulsed. When he remembered fragments of his final moments, the landscape trembled as if trying to recreate them. It was an echo of the physical world, but warped, like a memory fading in slow motion. Sweet and painful at once, a reminder that he no longer fully belonged to the life he'd left behind. The strangest part was the absence of boundaries. A horizon made of infinite glow stretched endlessly in all directions, like an ocean without water. The farther Aaron walked, the more he felt he was walking inside himself. It was a world that revealed, amplified, exposed. Yet something remained hidden, watching him with the patience of someone who had seen many travelers cross that threshold. Then came the unmistakable sensation of a presence he could not see. A soundless shiver moved across his spirit, tightening his breath. The light deepened, shifting into a tone that carried weight and meaning. Aaron understood then. The spiritual plane wasn't just showing him where he was. It was preparing him for what was coming, something that would change everything he believed about life, death, and himself. The camera in Aaron's hand pulsed with a kind of energy he had never felt before. It wasn't just warmth. It was as if the object breathed with the spiritual plane, vibrating in a strangely organic rhythm. When he brushed his finger over the lens, a shiver ran through him, not physical but spiritual, as if the camera recognized his touch. With every passing second it seemed to awaken more, like a creature opening its eyes to a new world. And Aaron knew this was no accident. He raised the camera, surprisingly weightless, and looked through the viewfinder. The spiritual plane, already magnificent, transformed instantly. The light gained layers, depths, colors that didn't exist on Earth. He could see trails, streams of energy moving like silent stories written in motion. The viewfinder revealed truths hidden beneath the light itself, showing a world far more dimensional than he had imagined. When he pressed the shutter, the click echoed in a way that felt alive, reverberating through the air. The photo appeared instantly, floating before him as a living, pulsing image. It wasn't paper or digital, it was like a memory given form. And it showed something his eyes had missed. A shimmering figure following him from the moment he arrived. It didn't feel threatening, only curious. Watching, studying. Every shot became a bridge between what Aaron could perceive and what the plane wanted to communicate. The camera wasn't just a tool. It was a messenger between worlds. He realized that each photograph didn't just reveal the invisible. It interpreted it, awakened it. It was as if the camera had been renamed by the spiritual plane itself, reborn with a new, profound purpose. The feeling fascinated him and frightened him. Then the air shifted, heavy with the sense that something was about to be revealed, something Aaron might not be ready to face. The camera vibrated harder, urging him to keep shooting. There were messages hidden in the light, truths waiting to be drawn out. And Aaron understood that while each image would bring answers, they would also pull him deeper into mysteries he wasn't sure he could escape. The first truly living presence in that realm didn't arrive as light but as a faint breath behind Aaron. He turned slowly, afraid that moving too fast might scare whatever was there, and saw the delicate figure of a child. Mira looked about 8, dressed in something that resembled fabric but was made of glow. Her eyes were wide, confused, searching for the world that had slipped away from her. She didn't speak. She only stared at him with a fragile mix of fear and hope. What struck him most was how incomplete she looked, as though parts of her were fading in and out of existence. Her form flickered like an unstable hologram, shifting between presence and absence. She wasn't just a wandering soul. She was an echo trapped between two worlds, pulled by forces Aaron couldn't understand. When he stepped closer, the light around her recoiled, as if trying to protect her, or hide her. Mira held her hands to her chest, clutching something invisible and desperately fragile. Her lips moved, but no sound escaped. Aaron felt she was trying to ask for help but didn't know how, or didn't have the strength. The spiritual plane around her felt different, denser, heavier, as if her presence disrupted the very fabric of that world. She was a flame trembling against the wind, fighting to remain lit. Even without speaking, Mira communicated something Aaron understood instantly. She had no idea where she was, no idea if she was alive, no idea if she was dead. And that uncertainty wrapped her in a quiet despair that tightened his chest more than he expected for someone no longer in the physical world. He wanted to say she wasn't alone, but he wasn't sure it would be true, or that he could protect her from whatever threatened her. Each second, the child grew paler, as though the realm were pulling pieces of her essence into unseen places. Aaron sensed danger, real, deep, silent danger. Something was trying to claim her, and as she stared at him with eyes far too full of sorrow, he knew their meeting wasn't coincidence. It was a calling, and answering it would change everything. Mira took a hesitant step toward Aaron, as if moving even a few inches demanded impossible strength from a body no longer fully her own. Her eyes trembled with a silent urgency, and for a moment he feared she might vanish before reaching him. But she raised her hand, small, trembling, almost translucent, and touched his fingertips. The touch was neither warm nor cold. It was something entirely different, like brushing against the feeling of fear itself. And in that exact moment, the world around them shifted. The light of the spiritual plane contracted, as though holding its breath. A wave of energy shot through Aaron, making his entire being vibrate with a pulse not meant for human bodies. Myra's touch carried raw truth, a depth of pain so sharp it felt as though it cut through not just that realm but every realm beyond. He felt memories that weren't his, flashes of fear, falling, darkness, fragments of Myra's final moment in the physical world. It was devastating and intimate all at once. And then, without him pressing anything, the camera fired. The click echoed like thunder inside an empty temple, tearing through the living silence of the realm. The camera glowed fiercely, vibrating with such intensity that Aaron stumbled backward. The photo materialized in the air, forming slowly as if torn from the fabric of time itself. But the image didn't show only Aaron and Mira. There was something else. Something that froze his breath. Mira recoiled, frightened, as if she understood the photograph was not just a capture but a revelation. The light around her tightened, defensive, uneasy. The spiritual plane reacted to the automatic shot, as though the act had awakened forces that preferred to stay asleep. And Aaron realized the photo wasn't accidental. It was a warning, a message, a sign that something was drawing near. The girl stared at him with a despair so deep it stole the air from his lungs. Myra's touch had been more than a gesture. It had been a trigger, a silent plea for help. The camera, now alive and aware, responded to truths he still couldn't grasp. And as the image hovered between them, still unfinished, Aaron felt he was about to witness something that would change everything, including the child's fate. The moment the photograph finished forming, Aaron felt his stomach tighten, as though the spiritual plane itself had shifted temperature. The image hovered, pulsing in waves of light and darkness, until a detail emerged that sent a chill sharp enough to make his breath tremble. Behind Mira stood a tall, stretched silhouette, impossibly disproportionate to any human form. It had no face, no eyes, only a void that swallowed all light around it. And even without movement, it was watching. The presence was so overwhelming that the photograph seemed to vibrate, as if the invisible material holding it together might tear apart. Mira stepped back, clutching her chest, her trembling revealing a familiarity with that shadow that terrified Aaron. A deep shiver crawled down his spine, a warning from the realm itself. This wasn't just a spirit. It was older, hungrier, aware. And it was here for her. When Aaron reached toward the image, the shadow reacted. The darkness inside the photo expanded, warping the surrounding light as if trying to cross into their space through the picture. Impossible, yet undeniably happening. The spiritual plane answered at once. Light flickered violently, the ground of energy trembled, and a low, almost inaudible hum vibrated through the air. This entity was no observer. It was a predator. Mira began to shake, and for the first time since he found her, she cried. Not a physical cry, but light unraveling from her form, like tears made of essence instead of water. The shadow in the photo pulsed harder, feeding off her desperation, thriving on her weakness. A fierce urgency rose inside Aaron, a need to protect her even without knowing how. The realm around them felt like it was holding its breath. The photograph darkened suddenly, as though being devoured from the inside, then vanished with a sharp crack. The air grew heavy, suffocating. Mira clung to Aaron's shirt, gripping it with a desperation that pierced him. The shadow, though no longer visible, hadn't left. It lingered, felt, anticipated, waiting. And Aaron understood with silent terror that the entity had no intention of stopping. The air around Aaron grew thick, as if the spiritual plane itself were trying to warn him of what truly hunted Mira. The energy that once moved softly now pulsed in tense, erratic waves, pressing against his chest with an unsettling weight. The shadow from the photograph wasn't merely a figure. It was a force, alive, starving, older than the silence of that realm. And the way it reacted to Myra's fear made one thing unmistakably clear. It fed on fragility. Mira tried to hide behind Aaron, but the plane reacted again, revealing a faint dark trail following her like a predator tracing the scent of prey. The light that once shaped itself around her appeared thinner, weaker, as if her essence were starting to unravel. She looked like a small flame battling an invisible wind. Aaron felt something tighten inside him, as if a buried instinct recognized the danger even without understanding it. Every second, the shadow grew stronger, despite remaining unseen. Myra's confusion, her fear, her vulnerability, each emotion nourished the entity hiding within the layers of the spiritual plane. The air turned colder, heavier, disturbingly still. The light flickered, waned, dimmed. It was undeniable. The more lost Mira became, the more the presence expanded. This was no spirit seeking peace. It was a devourer of incomplete souls. Aaron looked at the girl and noticed how her form flickered more violently than before. Parts of her seemed to be tugged outward by invisible threads. Her eyes shone with fear and exhaustion, as though resisting the entity drained what remained of her existence. The urgency inside Aaron intensified, burning into something fierce. He needed to act, but how do you fight something you cannot touch or see? Then a silent voice, not heard, but felt, swept across the realm like an ancient breath. It didn't belong to Mira. It didn't belong to Aaron. It felt woven into the fabric of the plane itself. And it delivered a truth with devastating clarity. The shadow would not stop while the child remained fragile. It fed on imbalance, pain, fractured innocence. And if nothing changed soon, Mira would be consumed entirely. A fate Aaron, for reasons he did not yet understand, could not allow. In the physical world, far from the shifting lights of the spiritual plane, Solace held Myra's hand with desperate strength, as if trying to keep her daughter from slipping into a place she could never reach. The hospital machines blinked in uneven rhythms, reflecting the fragility of the girl's life. Doctors spoke, but their words blurred into distant noise. All Solace could hear was her own frantic breathing. Powerlessness crushed her, and with each fading heartbeat from Mira, her despair grew sharper. Guilt had been a long shadow in Solace's life, one she tried to outrun for years. There were things she never said, choices she made believing there was always more time. But now, standing before her daughter suspended between life and death, regret clawed at her like a silent beast. She remembered the days she arrived late, the arguments that never needed to happen, the embraces she withheld. And she wondered, choking on the thought, if any of those fractures had pushed Mira too close to the edge. The hospital lights reflected off Solace's exhausted face, revealing a suffering only a mother could carry. She felt something larger unfolding, something invisible yet brushing against her skin like a warning. It was as if the world itself were holding its breath around them. Every second that passed made her understand that Mira wasn't simply unconscious. She was fighting, and that realization made Solace beg for a miracle with every cell she had. She leaned close to her daughter, whispering promises she'd never dared to speak aloud. Promises to be present, to change, to never let silence grow between them again. Her voice trembled with love and fear. Somehow, in a way she couldn't explain, she believed Mira could hear her from wherever she was, even if she couldn't answer back. It felt like speaking through a closed door, hoping her words would seep through the cracks. When a tear fell onto Myra's hand, Solace felt a faint warmth pulse beneath her fingers. A whisper of life, almost too subtle to notice. But it was enough to ignite a fierce hope inside her. "Come back to me," she begged silently. The physical world still showed no signs of change, yet something deep within told Solace that her daughter was trapped between worlds, and that time was running out. In the spiritual plane, Aaron sensed something that made his breath falter. The camera in his hand began pulsing again, but with a rhythm that didn't belong solely to that realm. It felt as though something from the physical world was reaching across dimensions and touching the awakened device. When he looked at Mira, he saw the light around her flicker differently, as if another heartbeat were echoing inside her. And then he understood. Someone was calling her. And that call came from far away. The camera shuddered and fired once more on its own. The photograph slowly materialized in the air, revealing not a shadow nor a creature of the spiritual plane, but a woman, Solace, sitting beside Myra's physical body, holding her daughter's hand with desperate strength, tears falling like tiny stars against the girl's skin. The image was not simply a reflection of the living world. It carried emotion, pouring warmth and human longing into the spiritual realm. Myra stepped forward when she saw the image, drawn to it as if it were a window into something familiar. The glow of her spirit shifted, steadier, brighter, tethered, as if Solace's love were reaching through the fragile corners of her soul. Aaron watched in awe. The photograph wasn't just a recording. It was a bridge, a living connection between the two worlds, strengthened by bonds no death could sever. Aaron realized then the role he was beginning to play, even without choosing it. The camera had not followed him by accident. It existed to reveal connections, not just beings. Every photograph showed not only what existed in the spiritual plane, but the heartbeat of those who still lived. Solace and Myra were bound in a way that the threshold between life and death could not undo. And now Aaron had become part of that bond, whether he wanted to or not. The image of Solace dissolved into soft particles of light that drifted toward Myra, strengthening her briefly with a warmth that felt unmistakably maternal. It was as if her mother's love had become spiritual fuel, anchoring her to existence just a little longer. Aaron felt that warmth pierce through his own chest, a calling he couldn't escape. At that moment, he understood with overwhelming clarity. The three of them were now intertwined by a destiny greater than any of them could imagine. And everything that followed would depend on choices he had yet to face. The light around Aaron began to shift, moving as though stirred by an invisible wind. The spiritual plane, once silent and endless, vibrated with a deep resonance, the prelude to something sacred revealing itself. A figure appeared, not by walking, but by existing, emerging from the light as if forged from it. Tall, serene, beyond any definition of male or female. Its form rippled softly like sunlight dancing on water. And yet, its presence carried absolute authority. This was the Guardian Lumen. The Guardian's eyes held no pupils, no iris. Only a steady radiance that seemed to see through Aaron, into layers he didn't know he possessed. When the voice came, it didn't travel through air. It echoed directly inside his chest, like a thought placed there. "The child is in danger," the Guardian said, with a calm weight that felt like destiny itself. "And you, Aaron, have stepped between two worlds. Now you are part of her crossing." The ground beneath Aaron trembled subtly, as if the revelation had physical weight. He wanted to ask what the shadow was, the thing hunting Myra, but Lumen answered before the question fully formed. "It is a devourer of frailty. It feeds on imbalance, fear, souls that have not yet found their path." The words carved themselves into the air. Myra is young, fragile. That is why it chose her. Responsibility settled onto Aaron like a burning mantle. The Guardian stepped closer, and the surrounding light unfolded like petals greeting the sun. "The camera you carry is not an object here. It is an extension of your perception. What it reveals, you must face." Aaron felt his heartbeat spike. Lumen continued, "Each photo is an intervention, and every intervention has a cost. You cannot save Myra without sacrificing something of yourself." For the first time, Aaron felt fear not of the shadow, but of his own role in this realm. Finally, with the solemnity of a verdict and the gentleness of hope, the Guardian said, "You were brought here because you still possess something rare, clarity within chaos. But clarity is not enough. You must choose whether to guide Myra, knowing the shadow will follow every step." The light around Lumen pulsed, humming like a gateway ready to open. And Aaron understood that his mission was no longer simply surviving this plane, but confronting what he never dared face in life. The light around Myra began to fracture, as if pieces of her were being pulled in opposing directions. The glow that once sheltered her now flickered like a candle fighting its final breath. Aaron watched helplessly as the spiritual plane shifted in color, revealing subtle cracks across the horizon, fissures that vibrated like open mouths. Lumen had warned that Mira risked being taken to a plane with no return. Now Aaron saw that threat advancing too quickly. Mira attempted a step, but her spirit buckled, as though her form were made of crumbling stardust. She looked at Aaron with wide, pleading eyes, seeking an anchor, a refuge, anything to keep her grounded. It was as if she were being pulled by a silent wind from a world no guardian dared enter. A sharp emotional pain cut through Aaron as he witnessed how fiercely she fought to stay. Around them, the plane formed corridors of light stretching into the distance, floating pathways that could lead either to salvation or ruin. Each path pulsed with its own energy, and Mira was being drawn toward one. The darkest, the quietest, the hungriest. That was the path to the plane of no return, where incomplete souls dissolved forever. Even unseen, the shadow seemed to smile within that void. Aaron ran toward Mira, grabbing her before she was pulled entirely. Her touch was lighter than ever, almost weightless, as if her existence diminished with each passing second. He tried to speak, but the words died before reaching the air. The spiritual plane muted him, testing the strength of his resolve. Mira could not remain on her own. She needed a guide, someone to hold her, lead her, face the abyss beside her. Then a phrase echoed through Aaron with the weight of an ancient oath. Crossing is not walking, it is choosing. He understood. Mira didn't need only to be dragged back. She needed to choose to return. But she could only choose if someone illuminated the right path. The spiritual plane was offering a choice while demanding a sacrifice. And Aaron realized that from this moment on, every step he took could cost not only Myra's existence, but his own. Aaron noticed the change in himself before any voice warned him. After every photograph, his spiritual body felt lighter, but not in a gentle way. Parts of him seemed to unravel, dissolving into the plane's luminous air. His outline flickered, his hands became momentary transparencies, and the act of existing grew harder to maintain. The camera, powerful and alive, was demanding a silent price, one he had never agreed to pay. Lumen had hinted that every intervention came with a cost, but no warning could prepare Aaron for this. With each click, something within him was pulled away, like a memory evaporating, like a piece of identity fading. Subtle but devastating. He wondered how long he could endure before vanishing completely. The spiritual plane seemed to watch him now, recognizing his growing weakness, measuring his endurance. Still, something kept him from stopping Mira. Every time the camera revealed something, it gave him direction, clarity, a chance to protect her. But the cost increased. After the last photograph, Aaron struggled to keep his feet anchored to the energetic ground. It felt like his body was being tugged backward, toward a place where beings without belonging simply disintegrated. The camera trembled with him, not as a tool, but as a creature aware of the sacrifice it demanded. Lumen appeared again, surrounding him with stabilizing light, though even the Guardian couldn't restore what had been lost. Each image you take, the voice resonated in Aaron's chest, breaks another thread connecting you to this plane. A bitter truth. He wasn't just helping Mira, he was exchanging himself for her, as if the balance of the realm demanded equivalence. Life for life, light for light, existence for existence. Even weakened, Aaron did not back away. The fear of fading was real, almost physical, but the thought of Mira being claimed by the shadow was far worse. He began to understand that the camera wasn't punishing him. It was testing his heart. And if he wanted to continue fighting for the girl, he would have to accept that each click erased a little more of who he was. As he looked at his nearly transparent hands, a question formed inside him. How much of myself can I lose before I am no longer me? Aaron stood still for a moment, feeling his spiritual body flicker like a flame caught in the wind. Every movement felt heavier, every breath shorter, as if the plane itself were encouraging him to surrender. He looked at Mira, struggling to stay whole, her small form growing more transparent with each passing moment. The unseen shadow gnawed at her essence, waiting patiently for her final collapse. And in that charged silence, Aaron understood. If he stepped back, Mira would be lost forever. Doubt cut through him like a thin blade. He felt fear, not just of dying, but of ceasing to exist entirely, without memory, without echo, without return. The spiritual plane could erase him as if he had never been. The thought froze him for a painful second. But then something within him awakened, something stronger than fear, something that had always guided him. The instinct to protect, to reveal, to bring light. Aaron walked toward Mira with a resolve that defied his fading form. The camera sensed his decision and glowed brighter, not in warning, but in solidarity. He knelt in front of the girl and offered his hand, a gesture that spoke louder than words. "I'm here. I won't leave you." Mira, fragile yet determined, gripped his hand with surprising strength, as though that touch were her last anchor to existence. In that moment, Aaron realized his choice wasn't rational. It was emotional, visceral, inevitable. He couldn't allow a child to be abandoned to darkness. If he had been brought to this realm with the camera, with that sensitivity, with the ability to see what others couldn't, then there was a reason. Not coincidence. Not accident. Purpose. And for the first time in his life or death, that purpose felt unmistakably clear. The shadow approached, sensing his decision like a provocation. The air thickened, almost suffocating, and the light around them flickered between fear and courage. Aaron tightened his grip on Myra's hand and raised the camera with the other, ready to pay whatever price remained. If disappearing was his fate, so be it, but he would not allow Mira to be taken while he still possessed a single thread of strength. His choice sealed their destinies forever. The shadow began to manifest without a clear form, like a dark vapor slithering across the luminous horizon of the spiritual plane. With every passing second, it grew denser, more terrifying, moving with the predatory calm of something fully aware of its goal. And its goal was Mira. The air thickened, vibrating with a tension sharp enough to cut the silence. Aaron realized that the weaker the girl became, the easier it was for the entity to approach. Mira squeezed his hand, but her strength was fading rapidly. Her spiritual form flickered in short intervals, as though she were being tugged back and forth between worlds. The shadow sensed this instability and surged forward, silent as lightning. It wasn't just approaching, it was attacking. The surrounding light recoiled, trying to shield them, but the entity forced its way through with terrifying ease. It was clear this creature did not obey the laws of the plane. Aaron raised the camera like a shield, unsure if it would make any difference. The entity paused briefly, as if analyzing him. Then, without warning, it hurled a burst of dark energy that hit Aaron with storm-like force. He was thrown backward, his form flickering violently, pieces of his existence peeling away. The pain wasn't physical but spiritual, yet it cut through him with the sharpness of heated steel. Mira cried out, not with sound but with light, and the flare of purity made the shadow recoil momentarily. Even weakened, Mira still held something the entity despised: innocence. But that resistance was fading fast. The shadow advanced again, more aggressive, leaving trails of darkness that eroded the very light of the realm. Lumen was nowhere in sight, and Aaron understood the truth. No help was coming. It was him against the ancient presence. Nearly translucent, with the camera pulsing like a wounded heart, Aaron stepped forward to face the shadow directly. He braced himself, placing his fading body between Mira and the entity, a fragile barrier dangerously close to breaking. The shadow towered over him, immense, ravenous, vibrating with hunger. And in that looming collision, Aaron knew this moment would define everything. Either he found strength to resist, or he would vanish trying. The journey of Aaron, Mira, and Solace is not merely a crossing between worlds, but a revelation of what truly binds souls when everything physical dissolves. In the spiritual plane, where lies cannot exist, every emotion becomes light or shadow, and every intention leaves visible marks. Within this landscape, love reveals its purest form, not as an abstract feeling, but as a force capable of crossing realms and shaping destinies. Aaron realizes that Solace's love for Mira is so powerful that it reaches places even death cannot erase. Guilt also becomes a quiet but decisive character. Solace carries old regrets, mistakes she wishes she could rewrite, empty spaces she never filled. Yet in the moment Mira's life slips from her hands, guilt stops being punishment and becomes purpose. In the spiritual plane, that guilt manifests as energy, a call that reaches Mira and keeps her from being lost entirely. The narrative shows that guilt, when transformed, can become a bridge rather than a cage. Redemption emerges as the invisible thread stitching the three destinies together. Aaron, who in life sought to capture truth through his camera, now faces the greatest truth of all, that his very existence can be used to save another. His redemption comes not from grand gestures, but from small choices made with courage, steps that bring him closer to the essence of who he always was. For Solace, redemption is accepting that it is never too late to love better, even when everything seems lost. And behind everything, an even greater theme unfolds: the power to see beyond life. Aaron's camera, transformed in the spiritual plane, symbolizes this expanded vision, the ability to perceive the invisible, to understand that forces, bonds, and purposes extend far beyond death. The story suggests that true sight is not in the eyes, but in the soul. To see beyond is to feel, interpret, intuit, to accept that existence continues even when the body does not. The narrative makes it clear that the physical and spiritual worlds are not separated by walls, but by perception. And when love is strong enough, when guilt becomes action, and when redemption is embraced as a choice, the worlds touch. In that meeting point, the story reveals its most powerful message. No one is ever truly alone. The bond between souls endures, guiding, saving, illuminating, even when everything seems to end. The story of Aaron and Mira doesn't end in the silence of the spiritual plane, but in the echo left behind, the echo of choices that ripple far beyond our understanding. What began as an accident became a journey neither of them was prepared for, a collision between light and shadow that exposed what lies behind what we call life. In the end, the real miracle wasn't surviving. It was seeing what most people spend their lives pretending isn't there. Aaron learned that courage isn't born from strength, but from love, even love for someone he barely knew. Mira learned that light never abandons those who still want to stay. And Solace learned that a mother's bond never ends, not even when death tries to break it. Together, they carried pieces of the answer to a question humanity has asked for centuries. What happens after death? The truth is, no one leaves alone, and no one returns without purpose. But the greatest revelation is this: some things only appear when we're finally ready to see them. Aaron's camera didn't gain power by accident. It awakened because he stopped looking with his eyes and started looking with his soul. Maybe that's what our world is missing: less fear of death and more courage to look beyond it. Because life doesn't end. It transforms, bends, expands into places we cannot comprehend. Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe what happened here is possible? Do you think something exists between life and what comes after? Have you ever felt a presence you couldn't explain? Share in the comments. Your story may be part of the next video. Before you go, like, subscribe, share, and activate the bell, Stories like this only breathe when you become part of them. And remember the phrase that carried this journey from beginning to end. Death is not the end. It's the moment we finally begin to see.